Welcome to New Day's Worship Gathering. We are a community of people from all walks of life that are ignited in our commitment to reach others with the message and love of Jesus. And as the New Day staff, we wanted to say a really big thank you for the staff offering that was shared with us at Christmas. It is such a joy just to be serving God together with each of you, and we are just really grateful for this family. So thank you, thank you. The current plan for New Day is that we will continue meeting online throughout the month of January with the hope that we can begin meeting again together in person at the beginning of February on February 7th at the YMCA. So as we meet online though, we have this immense privilege to join together in prayer from wherever we are. So we'd encourage you to get the New Day directory. If you need a new copy, you can contact info@newdaycov.org and just spend some time specifically praying for the individuals that participate at New Day, each of the kids, the teenagers, and the adults. If you'd also like to receive occasional prayer updates from individuals in the New Day community about ways that you can specifically be joining them in prayer, we'd love for you to join our prayer email list. And you can do that just by sending an email to info@newdaycov.org saying that you're interested in joining that list. So today and next Sunday, we are excited to have Dave Rinker teaching as we continue in our Renewal in the Wilderness series, walking through the book of Exodus. Dave is also leading a Wednesday evening Bible study on Zoom, following along with the Sunday series. So everyone is welcome to join. We would love for you to be a part of that Bible study. Zoom link for that is in the weekly email. So as we begin our time of worship this morning, we want to reflect on the words from God to the Israelites in Exodus chapter 6, verses 5 through 7. In these verses, God says, "You can be sure that I have heard the groans of the people of Israel, who are now slaves to the Egyptians. And I am well aware of my covenant with them. Therefore, say to the people of Israel, I am the Lord. I will free you from your oppression, and I will rescue you from your slavery in Egypt. I will redeem you with a powerful arm and great acts of judgment. I will claim you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who has freed you." So would you join us now in worshiping this God of freedom and redemption?
He's our rescuer, he's our rescuer. We are free from sin forevermore. Oh, how sweet the sound, oh, how grace abounds. We will praise the Lord, our rescuer. There is good news for the captive, good news for the shamed. There is good news for the one who walked away. There is good news for the doubter, the one religion failed. For the good Lord has come to seek and save. He's our rescuer, he's our rescuer. We are free from sin forevermore. Oh, how sweet the sound, oh, how grace abounds. We will praise the Lord, our rescuer. He is beauty for the blind man, riches for the poor. He is friendship for the one the world ignores. He is pasture for the weary, rest for those who strive. For the good Lord is the way, the truth, the life. Yes, the good Lord is the way, the truth, the life. He's our rescuer, he's our rescuer. We are free from sin forevermore. Oh, how sweet the sound, oh, how grace abounds. We praise the Lord our rescuer. So come and be chainless, come and be fearless, come to the foot of Calvary. There is redemption for every affliction here at the foot of Calvary. So come and be chainless, come and be fearless, come to the foot of Calvary. And there is redemption for every affliction here at the foot of Calvary. He's our rescuer, he's our rescuer. We are free from sin forevermore. Oh, how sweet the sound, oh, how grace abounds. We will praise the Lord our rescuer. We will praise the Lord our rescuer. When darkness tries to roll over my bones, when sorrow comes to steal the joy I own, when brokenness and pain is all I know, I won't be shaken, I won't be shaken. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Your shame no longer has a place to hide, and I am not a captive to the lies. I'm not afraid to leave my past behind, and I won't be shaken, I won't be shaken. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. And there's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. There's power in your name. There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. There's power in your name. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. No, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Standing in your love, and I'm standing on the rock. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, "What have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services." So he had this chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots, along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites, who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea, near Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-zephon.
As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert."
Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians will see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still."
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they will go in after them, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen."
Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night the cloud brought darkness to the one side and light to the other side, so neither went near the other all night long.
Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites were through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left.
The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud and the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, "Let us get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt."
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen. The entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea, not one of them survived.
But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant.
Oh, hey, friends. So, there's this famous story in the Bible. Maybe you've heard it. It goes like this. There's this young boy who fights this giant who's been a warrior since he was a boy. This character David, right, who's the runt of his family, the youngest child, shows up to the front lines because he's bringing some loaves and some cheese to his brothers and the officers that are fighting this group called the Philistines. Okay, famous story, right? And even Malcolm Gladwell, the author, wrote a book about it called David and Goliath. It's a really good book. You should read it. But this story is in our memories, right? It's in our traditions. It's become sort of a loaded metaphor, right? But if you kind of zoom in on a few features of the story, you end up noticing something that few people point out. And so my friend Louis Weber pointed this out to me. He says, hey, look, David shows up, right, with his grilled cheese sandwiches, it seems, these sack lunches for his brothers, and notices the scene unfolding, that no one is challenging this Goliath, who's been challenging Israel for 40 days, which in the Bible is a long time. And so 40 days this has been going on. David shows up and offers to fight this guy, right? Fight Goliath. And he's dismissed really quickly, but David says, hey, your servant, I have killed lions and bears. Look, I'm a shepherd, and I've done this sort of thing. And this uncircumcised Philistine, as he calls Goliath, it'll look just the same, right? Lions and bears, oh my, would be the midrash there. And because God has delivered me from those things, this Philistine will be no match because God's on my side. Essentially, he says, what I've done in the past has sort of prepared me for this moment. And, he puts on all the chainmail, all the armor. It doesn't fit. He's never worn it before. And the text says that he grabs his shepherd's staff as he's getting ready to fight, which is an odd weapon choice. But he also grabs his sling, which is the choice weapon of shepherds. A slinger, if they were enlisted in the military at that time, they would have been like an ancient sniper, right? They could hit moving targets at about 200 yards. So David is very, very strategic, right? He grabs his sling and he approaches this giant. And the giant seems to not understand the situation. He can't quite see what's going on. He's describing, it seems, the color of David's hair. Maybe his eyesight is poor. And before he even has a chance to swing his sword, David plants one of those 5 stones that he picked up along the way right between his eyes. And so David says, this thing I've done in the past, this shepherding stuff, has prepared me for this. It's almost like this is like that in his mind. So David notices what's already in his hand. Now I want to tell a few stories to sort of put David's story in the larger story of our lives, but also the biblical story of the Exodus. Okay, so my story, my friend's story, Moses. We'll look at a word, Midbar, and then if we have time, right, if the sermon allows, we'll launch into Mark 5. So my story goes something like this. I always wanted to be a teacher, right? Present day, if you ask me like metaphorically, what's in my hand, what's the thing I do? It's an expo marker with a green tip, so I know they're mine. I love teaching, and I knew it in high school. That's what I wanted to do. But there was this issue I had, or have. I'm dyslexic. And so the most terrifying thing in the world for a kid who's dyslexic is to read in front of people, which I noticed teachers have to do a lot. This became abundantly clear in 12th grade. Right? I'm getting ready to graduate. I'm excited about being a history teacher one day. And I am called on in class. Now, if you're dyslexic, you typically pick strategically, you pick the spot in the classroom where you're least likely to be chosen. And it's about 3 rows in, okay, just in case anyone was wondering. But Mrs. Wittes called on me to read, and we were reading Shakespeare. And Shakespeare's hard enough, right? And so I start kind of stammering through this soliloquy as I'm reading it, and she's growing impatient. So she says this to me in front of the whole class, the kid who wants to be a teacher. Today, David. And I didn't cry there. I did cry later. And I remember feeling crushed. Just, how am I ever going to be a teacher if I can't read in front of people? What am I going to do? Well, a couple weeks later, we were still doing Shakespeare stuff, and we had to memorize a speech. And I think I was third or fourth to give the speech, a soliloquy, a memorized soliloquy. And as I watched my classmates before me kind of stammer through their speeches, I realized that I was going to do a pretty good job. And in fact, as my students stood in one place and sort of just tried to recall, what they had studied, the words they had memorized and tried to internalize, I kind of looked around the room and I thought, maybe I'd walk around the room and do it, because I had sort of spatially memorized this soliloquy. Different parts of the room were different parts of the speech. And so, Miss Wittes was very impressed. Not a Shakespearean actor or anything like that, but I nailed it. I nailed it because for me, internalizing information, right, was just like what I had to do to get by, So years later, I'm teaching U.S. history, high school. It's the AP class, A-push as they call it. And I have my whiteboard marker. And I remember, running into this hard sentence I was reading aloud with some students. And so I closed the book and we had this long conversation about learning disabilities and what it feels like, right, to be challenged by a teacher, but maybe not, embraced for who you are. And I cried there too, right? A couple other students maybe felt that as well. But I had the opportunity to tell students, right, hey, I see you. This thing I did a long time ago, it's kind of like right now. I have a former student of mine who's really good at building things. And he was approaching graduation. Hurricane Katrina hit. And we went down there as a youth group, and we served there for just a week or so. And then we were getting ready to go home. And he was like, we're just going to leave, huh? We're just going to hang out for a week and then leave. He was really kind of distraught by the fact that we had basically taken a vacation in Biloxi and had hung out in New Orleans and had a great time serving, but he saw the larger need. And so when he graduated just a couple months later, he moved down as an 18-year-old and starting his building career. And he's a builder now too. But he saw that there was a need in the world, and he had this gift, this thing that was already in his hand. In Nick's case, his name's Nick, it was probably a hammer, right, as a metaphor. And so if you look at your own life, you might be able to articulate right now, maybe not, but maybe so, the thing you already have in your hand. What is that? Right? Maybe it's not a literal object, but maybe it's something you love to bless people with. And so it's helpful for us to take this conversation about gifts and serving and using what you have, what's already in your hand. It's helpful for us to see the Exodus story in this light. Moses, his name is Moshe, and it literally means to be drawn out. So as the story gets going, right away in chapter 2, Moses is drawn out of the waters. Okay. Then Moses, Nacha, the word we translate smite or plague, Moses plagues an Egyptian because this Egyptian taskmaster is beating a Hebrew, his own people, it says, his own people twice. And then he becomes a fugitive, but Moses is drawn through the waters. He plagues an Egyptian, and then he meets God at a burning bush. Now, the Hebrew word for bush, we should note, is the word Sinai. It's the same root as the word Sinai. where the people meet God much later in the story, right? When they get the 10 Commandments, chapter 19 and chapter 20 of Exodus. And it happens that mountain, Sinai, is on fire. And so if you look in detail through Moses' life, you see all these episodes that come up. Oh, he's in the wilderness as a shepherd for 40 years before he leads the people through the waters, right? Leads them through these plagues that plague the Egyptians, and eventually shepherds God's people, not just sheep, but shepherds God's people in the wilderness for 40 years. So when we get to chapter 14, our text that we're looking at, we're listening in on this episode. You hear the people sort of remind Moses, hey, back in chapter 4 and 5, we told you we didn't want to go and do this, right? You hear their griping and their moaning. But Moses starts in, right? He says, you need only be still. So it says, Moses says to the people in verse 14. Moses says to the people, and he said, you need only be still. Yahweh, the Lord, will fight for you. And this is almost like a poem, he says. It shows up later in chapter 15 that Yahweh is a warrior. Yahweh will fight for Yahweh's people. But then God says to Moses, there's kind of this balance to these verses. God says, what are you doing? Get going. I've given you everything you need. And earlier in the story too, God has asked Moses to notice what's already in his hand. What's that in your hand? In chapter 4. What's that in your hand? Moses has performed miracle after miracle. God has performed miracle after miracle through Moses, sign after sign through Moses via his staff, his shepherd staff. And so God goes, use your staff. Divide the waters. The people will walk through on dry ground, which is what God does in creation. God divides the waters. And so God is doing this creational, this definitive act through Moses. But essentially God says, what's in your hand? What have you been doing your whole life? Right? This escaped fugitive, right? This young, ragtag little shepherd boy, David, this escaped fugitive, Moses. The least likely characters both happen to be shepherds. Both have a staff in their hand. And this is what they take, right, to essentially free God's people from an opposing army. Pharaoh's armies are right on their heels. They are right on the brink of this space that in the Bible is just theologically loaded. The desert, the wilderness, we're calling it the space of renewal, right? The word is midbar, and the root of the word, the M, kind of is like, hey, the M in midbar refers to the rest of the word and says, hey, it's the thing where these things happens. And so the M makes us go, okay, what's the root? And it's dabar, which is also translated word or stuff, which isn't very helpful. But this is the way I like to translate midbar. It's where stuff happens, man. Stuff happens in the wilderness, right? It's an incubation place. My friend Jeff calls it the land between the promised land and the land of bondage. Now, what's interesting is that the people, right, as they enter the wilderness and eventually covenant with God, they were formerly in slavery. And now Moses says that you are to worship the Lord. Now, there's something going on here that's just kind of just below the surface. The word slavery or serve, bondage is translated all these ways, is avad, and the word to worship or serve the Lord is avad. So essentially, they are freed from slavery only to serve, right, the Lord. You could translate it either way, but what the story is telling us is that there's something the people have been doing for a long time, kind of like Moses, kind of like David. The people have been in slavery for a long time, and God is taking their story and God is redeeming that story. God is including that former story in this new story. No longer are you slaves. No, you're worshipers of the one true God. Fascinating. So when Jesus comes on the scene, right, and he calls these fishermen, they have nets in their hand and they're throwing their nets out. And Jesus says, hey, come follow me. I'll make you fishers of people. Right? Jesus takes the thing they're already doing and says, that will be kind of what you do. I'm going to convert your imagination about what you're supposed to be doing in this world. Right? And in Mark chapter 5, right after he calls some disciples, he takes them over to this place called the Decapolis. They cross over a sea and they run into this Gerasene demoniac. And essentially the way the story goes is Jesus casts a legion of demons out of this man and into a herd of pigs, which if you're reading the Bible and you get to this point, you're like, all right, I've read it all, right? And so an insight here, though, this is what people have noticed over the years, is that through archaeological digs and all this stuff, that area, the Decapolis, the Roman legion that was stationed there, their insignia was a boar, was a pig. So they'd march around with this flag with a boar on it. And so some commentators think that Jesus is sort of doing kind of a mini Exodus, right? A mini throwing the armies of the enemy into the sea, because eventually Jesus allows these pigs to trample off a cliff into the sea. And the disciples, if they're picking up on what's going on, they're like, oh my gosh, this is serious business. Because the only person who does that is Yahweh, right? Is the God of Israel. Who is working in this man? Who is this man? And so Jesus invites his church to take the thing they have in their hand, whatever it is, and imagine where it might fit in his story. The early church, grappled with this. They had everything in common. It said people would sell things and just, pool their resources. Whatever they had in their hand was up for grabs, right? Was part of this new story. It was claimed for Jesus. It was claimed for this new community. Paul talks about this as spiritual gifts, right? As charis or charisma that we all share in the Spirit. So what's in your hand? What's in your hand? I have the feeling that to drum down or to drill in the question that leads this sermon, what does it mean to be saved from yourself? Maybe it takes a long look inward, right? A journey inward to ask, what does God put in my hand? How is God going to lead me, not to serve, some worthless kingdom, but to serve God's kingdom, ultimately? That fear and trembling, right? That working out of our salvation in the church, it's very personal. It's also communal. But in this time, I wonder if we could slow down, ask ourselves a set of questions. What is God up to in my life already? Can you look back over this past year and start to nail down some of those things that are sort of collecting dust in your hand? Blow them off. Friends, may the God who freed the Israelites, who used a fugitive shepherd, a young boy to kill a giant, may that same God remind you that Jesus' Spirit is at work in your life. May we, the kinds of people that start to notice and name that work and jump in and participate. Peace be with you, friends.
worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none besides you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none besides you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Only there is no one like you. There is none besides you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken.